Jimmy Dore had a good segment on. I'm going to review it and I'm going to expand on it. But before I begin, I would just ask that if you like this video, please hit the like as well as the subscribe button. And for those of you who are subscribed, just make sure you haven't been knocked off. Thanks. Okay, so the segment Jimmy Dore had was about how Patreon had knocked off Sargon of Akkad. That's a YouTube channel. And in retaliation, Sam Harris said he was going to drop Patreon. He was no longer going to use it. He was going to accept subscriptions. For those of you who don't know, Patreon allows people with various YouTube channels to accept donations because YouTube demonetized controversial or political content. They're only happy, if you're doing beauty shows, pet tricks, if it's corporate propaganda, things that the corporatists would approve of. And Patreon they dropped this Sargon of Akkad because they felt he was too controversial. He was saying things that made them uncomfortable. And that is a clear violation of the First Amendment, freedom of speech. He did not say anything, and this is even according to Patreon, that would be considered illegal under the First Amendment. You're not allowed to threaten to kill people or have people killed. We already have laws on the books to establish that. The Founding Fathers created the First Amendment so people could say things that made you uncomfortable. You don't want to hear or listen to things in an echo chamber. That's a dictatorship. In order to have a democracy, you have to be able to listen to points of view that you don't necessarily like. I can't really comment on this Sargon of Akkad. I don't follow his show. I saw him on one Joe Rogan clip, but it was a short clip, and I really couldn't ascertain where he was coming from. So I'm not going to comment on his content. Needless to say, it was not illegal. Whatever he was saying, that is established. It wasn't in violation of the First Amendment. And so what Patreon did, because they felt they didn't like what he was saying, they dropped him. He cannot accept donations to keep his show going through Patreon, and Patreon takes these donations. You get the donations through Patreon. They take their little percentage, whatever their cut is, and then the person, the content creator gets the rest. So the Sargon was dropped, and Jimmy, of course, rightly so, opposed this, and Sam Harris is in protest. He says he's no longer going to use Patreon. He's no longer going to accept viewer donations through Patreon. He'll have a membership. He'll only accept donations through memberships of his site. Sam Harris, I don't really agree with him on a lot of stuff. Sometimes he says some intelligent things. I listened to his debate with Cenk Uygur and some other things. I'm not a fan of his. I do like his mother, Susan Harris. She was the creator of the Golden Girls, which was a pretty good show in my opinion. But Sam Harris, he's financially secure. I don't think he has to worry about taking donations. He's wealthy in his own right, and I don't know if he ever got any of that Golden Girls money, but needless to say, he's probably doing all right. But it's good. And Jordan Peterson jumped in as well. They're talking about creating an alternate platform so people don't have to worry about being deplatformed. I don't know if that's only going to be for people who agree with their, opinions. It should be for everybody, even people who are critical of Sam Harris or whatever. But the point is, freedom of speech is crucial to a democracy. And Jimmy brought up another point. They don't only do it to people they consider right-wing. So this Sargon of Akkad, they got rid of him because they said he was too right-wing. Patreon also dropped, and Jimmy brought this up, and I never saw this channel, or this guy. It's called IGD. It's going down. He was a progressive, but they thought what he was saying was too controversial from the progressive side, did not fall into the corporatist globalist narrative. So this guy got bumped off for no good reason. And, Jimmy rightly pointed out that these social media platforms, these are our new town squares. This is how people communicate, disseminate ideas in the 21st century. Okay, people don't go on corners anymore and stand on boxes, and preach whatever they have to preach or say whatever they have to say. They don't have a printing press in their basement and hand out little homemade newspapers on the street corners. We disseminate, or our speech is through the internet. That is what speech is in the 21st century. So for those of the corporatist types who are saying, well, Patreon's a private company, right? They could drop anybody. YouTube could demonetize anybody they want if what they're saying is controversial, or even bump you off. Look what they did to Alex Jones. I don't agree with Alex Jones. I think he used to be a pretty cool dude when he was into, he was a civil libertarian. Then he started endorsing like Sarah Palin, Ted Cruz. He became like this Republican evangelical guy. I don't know what it was. I heard him one day. I never listened to him, regularly. I would tune him in every now and then. I was pretty surprised. So while I don't agree with what he was saying, I certainly disagree in the strongest terms in throwing this guy off the air. And he disappeared from Twitter, YouTube. I guess Alex Jones fans could find him, but they disappeared him. And so when these private corporations control all the platforms of speech, they could make anybody disappear into oblivion. And this is all part of their Orwellian plan. For those of you who don't know, this is a corporate dictatorship. Some people live in a matrix, because there's this thing called a Republican Party and a Democratic Party, and you get to choose who the global elites want you to pick from. They'll give you two choices. You could choose A or B, and you think you live in a democracy. Meanwhile, after Citizens United, the corporations, the banks give these politicians their, bribes or contributions, whatever you want to call it. And so there is the illusion of democracy, what political philosopher Sheldon Wolin called inverted totalitarianism. It's a fake mask of democracy that hides a corporate totalitarian state. And until, Jimmy rightly pointed this out. So until Facebook, YouTube become public utilities, which they should, because they are the only ones who have, who control the access to free speech. Otherwise, we have no free speech. When the country became corporatized, when it became a total corporatocracy, that's it. We can't speak without these corporations. And for them, these Silicon Valley billionaires, these deep state surveillance corporations who work with Facebook and YouTube and whatever, for them to decide what is acceptable and unacceptable speech is a disgusting smack in the face for those men who died for our Bill of Rights, for freedom of speech. It's disgusting. And to see these little wiggly worms actually happy, these corporatists, these globalists, these neocons, these neoliberals rejoicing because people are getting bumped off because it doesn't agree with their Hillary Clinton boundaries of acceptable speech. They make me sick. But there's a story how this happened. This didn't happen overnight. This has been a process that happened after the 9/11 coup d'etat, after the Patriot Act. This has been a slow, you don't lose democracies or republics overnight. It's usually incremental, although it's been happening at a very rapid pace here. They used a couple of techniques or a couple of laws that they passed, or a couple of laws that they actually knocked off. So how how are these corporatists going to create this Orwellian state? Well, they've already done it they've already done it. They did it through legislation. The first thing they did was they killed net neutrality. That was huge. Net neutrality gave everyone equal access to the internet. In other words, I could start a website and whatever I disseminated would have the same potential to reach audiences as a big corporation. And what they did by killing net neutrality is, and what they're in the process of implementing is, first off, they've given these Verizon, Comcast, these surveillance state corporations, they've given them the power to target IP addresses, bump anybody off, prevent them from disseminating their information from their websites. But secondly, what they're trying to do is create an internet toll highway. So what that entails is, let's say I'm Mary's Cakes. I have a cake company. So presently, for the short term, right now you could still do this. I could create Mary's Cakes website, and I could advertise my cakes just like any other company. And what these corporatists want to do is they want to create a toll highway. So if I want my information or what's being disseminated from my website to travel quickly, in other words, so it doesn't go back to like 1998 with the hourglass. Remember how slow dial-up internet used to be? I have to pay this high toll. And then my information will go as fast as anybody else's. But the problem is they want to increase these tolls so only big corporations can afford to have their information travel through the internet quickly. So now Mary can't afford her, to advertise quickly on the internet with her little website. So now she has to go to a big site like a YouTube or whatever giant conglomerate media corporation there is, that now she has to use them as the conduit to travel, to get her information so you will know about Mary's cakes. But what happens if Mary's cakes are somehow objectionable to the website, right, to the corporate platform? Let's say she does sexually provocative cakes. I'm just making that up. They probably wouldn't care. But let's say she does something they don't like. Now Mary gets bumped off. She has no platform she could go on. Nobody will ever hear about her cakes. Well, let's change that to a news media site. Let's say I want to put out a news media website. I want to give the truth. I want to disseminate truth. I don't want to disseminate the CIA psyops like CNN does or MSNBC. Well, now I can't do it because there's a toll. I can't afford to pay it. Only big corporations can afford to pay that toll. So now, once again, I have to use this private corporation called YouTube or whatever giant, corporation platform that is available. All right, so I pay them. I pay my monthly service fee or whatever to use them or however they do it. Maybe they get advertising revenue. But once again, what if they don't like it? What if it is like Patreon that bumped off this Sargon guy? Or where they bumped off Alex Jones, or even the progressive, if you're a progressive, IGD. Now I'm totally screwed. I'm in oblivion. You'd never hear about me again. I'm disappeared. This is high-tech disappearance. Like they used to make people, the Gestapo or the Soviet NKVD used to make people disappear and you'd never hear from them again. This is how a corporatocracy does it. They just silence you and nobody hears about you. You're just atomized into the ethosphere. And that's the game. And if it's not, it gets worse because they also pulled another one. They pulled something called the SESTA-FOSTA Act. This is particularly horrendous. This is equally damaging. There used to be protections. So let's say I had a website and somebody put something crazy on the comments section. I couldn't be sued for that. In other words, third parties could put stuff on my site and I wasn't legally liable. I couldn't be sued. And so if somebody writes like a bad comment, they would go after the commenter or whatever. Somebody posts something on YouTube. YouTube, let's say it was illegal. They could go after the person who posted the video, but YouTube was protected because it was a media platform. And what SESTA-FOSTA did was they took that away. So now anything YouTube posts, they could technically be sued for. The thing is, YouTube has an army of lawyers. They're owned by Google. They're worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. They're not really worried about it too much. But what if I have a small site? What if I have a small news media site? Somebody posts a comment or, a video. I could be sued and bankrupted. And the SESTA lost that. SESTA-FOSTA Act killed that protection. How did they do it? It was a plot it was primarily two players. It was the deep state, and it was the Hillary Clinton feminist anti-sex worker brigade. So what they did, they have these Hillary Clinton neo-feminists. They're on this kick to knock out prostitution. I personally think prostitution should be decriminalized. What consenting adults do in their bedroom is nobody's business. Obviously, things like forced sex trafficking and things of that nature, I'm talking about consenting adults. Sex trafficking should be illegal if it's forced or anything like that. And I'm going to say how actually the SESTA-FOSTA Act actually enhanced or empowered sex traffickers and pimps. But let me explain a little further. So what happened was you had companies like Backpage. And Backpage used to allow escorts or hookers, sex workers, whatever, to advertise on their site. And the government couldn't go after them because they were protected by SESTA-FOSTA. So they used these Hillary Clinton neoliberal anti-sex worker brigades to go after Backpage. And they said, oh, sex trafficking. And the one who spearheaded in California was Kamala Harris. So the way they went after Backpage was they eradicated those protections that that allowed people to not be sued by posting stuff by third parties. That was Backpage's protection. That's why they were allowed. That's why they were able to legally put up hooker ads or escort ads. But once SESTA-FOSTA was enacted, now the government said, no, we could go after you because you're not protected anymore. Any ad that you post on your platform, your website, you are legally liable for. And the deep state wanted to do this because they wanted to be able to go after anybody who posted things that they found controversial. They could have them sued, bankrupted. There was no longer that free speech internet protection. And just as a side note, SESTA-FOSTA Act actually drove prostitution and made it underground, made it dangerous. Now women had to return to the streets. Now they're susceptible to pimps. While there was prostitution online, they could vet the customers. There was a digital record of who they were communicating with. They could find out who they were. There was a screening process. So they actually endangered women, but the Hillary Clinton neoliberal feminists don't give a damn about that. Remember the biggest Hillary Clinton neoliberal feminist of all, Madeleine Albright, starved 500,000 Iraqi children to death. These women are vile murderers. They love blood and they love destruction. They are demonic. But I digress. So with these two laws, and then with net neutrality basically giving full reign of the internet over to private corporations, enacting the SESTA-FOSTA Act, they control all free speech on the internet, or all speech, I should say, totally controlled. They killed the First Amendment. And you were wondering how they were going to do it. Well, they got rid of the Fifth and Sixth Amendments and Eighth Amendments with the Patriot Act, NDAA. They killed the Bill of Rights. This was the most fundamental component, and they just atomized it. And the founding fathers must be rolling over in their graves. These corporatist globalists, they want a corporate dictatorship, and they are doing it step by step. First, they came for Sargon of Akkad. Then they came for Alex Jones. They came for IGD. Then they'll come for me. Then they'll come for you. They won't stop until we have become completely enslaved, completely under their mercy, and they have the power to exterminate us at any time they want with the push of a button. They want a neoliberal Orwellian totalitarian nightmare. They want to create gulags like Guantanamo Bay all over the country. They eventually, as this sham economy starts to fall apart, this globalist economy by the bankers, they are going to crack down to keep it together. The facade of this false democracy is going to dissipate, and you will see what you are dealing with. The worst totalitarians, since Stalin, since Hitler. These globalists are a nightmare. This is the Democratic Socialist Libertarian. If you dig the message, please like, subscribe, share. Feel free to sound off in the comments section. For more information, go to demsolib.com, Twitter, Instagram, @demsolib. Thanks for listening.